And there we are, rocking and rolling with Ismail Benhayoun. Thanks for coming on the show. It's going to be a lot of interesting stuff to talk about today and a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to this.
Thanks for having me, Pete. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So to what you do and who you are and who you work for is not known to the masses in golf yet, which is one of the appeals that I had through our connection with Jennifer and the reason to have you on, because I love finding out things that are going on in the golf world and then bringing it to the masses or whatever masses I reach with this show, that people can have a better understanding of what happens. And in this instance, today we're going to talk about club head development and shaft development, which is what you focus on. And you're really heavily involved in AI. So just for starters and somebody out there, because I'm sure at every level there's going to be a lot of people who don't understand how AI and golf are connected. So can you just explain a little bit about what you do and how you use AI and what it is?
Sure. Well, it's a very broad topic. It's a huge trend, right? So first of all, let's make sure that everyone is on board. When we talk about AI, we're talking about artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. I don't know if someone knows another AI, right? I'd say number one, when we talk about AI, we want to keep in mind that we are talking about something that is related to data, right? It all starts there. Now, data can be collected or could be created. There is a difference there, right? And I'm sure that we will keep talking here and we will go a little bit deeper in all these things. But what we do, and I mean, probably people already read about my bio or description, where my background. I work for a company called Altair. We are a technology company. We provide technology and services in the domain of AI-driven design. And we do that with high-performance computing. We do that with expertise. We do that with advanced simulation, with one goal: helping companies make better product faster, cheaper, and in a more sustainable way. So why am I talking about all this, and how does it tie to AI, right? Simply because everyone out there, from car manufacturers to airplanes to golf manufacturers, been following a certain product development cycle. And what I mean by that, a certain phases and step-by-step process to come up with a final product that pleases the masses. An essential element in all that is I have a concept, I have a design, I validate that design, and I produce it. And along those lines, at some point, there is data that comes into a certain form. So where does this data come from? It comes from testing, historical years of testing and experience that is gathered, and subjectively could be used to say, oh, I've done this in the past. I think this is how I should implement or use that information for the next design. Or you really take that data and you put in somewhere to make a decision. This is where we start talking about AI processes. And the first element of that process is what we call machine learning. What is machine learning? It's simply the process of making a decision based on the data only.
Mm-hmm.
What is AI? AI is that additional layer you add to this data. And this could be a process, it could be an equation, it could be anything that enables you now to add prediction, creativity on top of that data to come up with another type of decision. Does it make sense?
Yeah. So the first question that pops into my mind is if, and we talked a little bit about this last week when we were doing the scheduling and getting connected, is how do you account for, or is there a way to account for that the data input that's being uploaded or however it's being utilized, that data is correct? Because if you get some faulty input, then your output
Mm-hmm.
is going to be skewed in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
I give an example. Is I spent a number of years in the club fitting sector, and if somebody's clubs were really off, like their shafts were, and I'll just use a drastic example. If they were a relative beginner or higher handicap, let's say a 20 handicap, and they had extra stiff shafts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their swing speed was usually going to be significantly slower or reduced because they were trying to work so hard to move the club because of the extra weight that it had. So the data that we input on their swing speed was going to be skewed, and we knew that going in. So, I mean, after so many years, you kind of learn the differences and what the potential is that they can get to. So as far as using AI, because if the AI is doing a prediction off the data input, how do you account for any skewing of the inputted data?
This is a very good question, and it says you are touching now the fundamental element of successful implementation of an AI-driven process. To be successful in bringing that into your process, you need two type of persons, because data is good, but you need people to look at it. There is the data engineer who is responsible of collecting data, and I'm not offending anyone out there in listening to us. And it's the data engineer collecting data, manipulating data, cleaning up data. And when I say cleaning up, it could be based on just formatting.
Mm-hmm.
I have a sensor sent me a 1,000 miles per hour swing speed. Not possible. Delete that. It's an anomaly, right? Whatever. There is a common sense knowledge of whatever, and he's like, well, let me clean this up, put it in the right packages, the right boxes, the right formatting, so that the next expert comes in picture. It's the data scientist. The data scientist has this responsibility now to bring together the knowledge of how to manipulate data and use it with the domain expertise. All right. Sensors today are so cheap. Whatever, anything out there is so cheap to collect data. It's a little bit more expensive to store it, but using it is the most expensive part, because you need the right people to come in and look at it in the right way.
So it's filtered. There's a series of filters put in place.
There is a series of filters, and those filters could be automated, could be machine-based filters. You teach a machine, when data comes in, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. It's a first filter. And then the domain expert comes as an additional layer. Now let's see what got filtered. Is it filtered properly? And now, what recipe do I need to apply to make sense and make a decision out of this data? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me take a second. If I was to design a driver head, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine how many test data I could collect, data that I could collect out there from fitters, from at the OEMs and all that. Now, I might have an objective. Let's say I'm an OEM, and I have an objective in designing a certain driver head. I want the low spinning head, and I want the max COR head, and I want the most aerodynamic one. What do you think? Can I use the same data and inputs to get these three heads at the best performance?
That's a very interesting question. I would have to say that of the data that you have gathered, I mean, that's your best chance of optimizing all three of those variables. Yeah.
Yes. So I could look at it that way. I say, I grab all this data and I try to inject it as an influence to how I want to design these three heads. Or I can get more optimized in my process and say, wait a second, this is how I can now interrogate the data. Out of this data, people that want to have low spin, they usually also have, I don't know, high swing speeds, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's filter down to that. Oh, now it's interesting. When I put these two filters together, I am giving higher priority to certain criterias in my design. And therefore, and I can optimize this driver head for this and that rather than those others. And therefore, the design could look slightly different and therefore more performant than the more aerodynamic one or whatever it is. This is how data can be brought in to drive the design.
How with the ability? So, a number of years ago, if we, and someone's going to try to probably correct me on social media, but let's go back 15, 20 years ago when they started having adjustable weights and heads. First, it was sliding weights and heads. And as of the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, it's been weights that either are towards the front, meaning the face, or they're towards the back, at the back side of the club, and in drivers in particular. Was AI influential in showing the OEMs that, look, you're better off, because most of them seem to have two different heads or multiple heads nowadays, where some of them the weight is towards the front, which tends to be for the, as you mentioned earlier, high swing speed players. They want that spin rate to come down, and some of them happen to be towards the back for usually a higher handicap player that needs a little more spin, a little more lift to get the ball up. So did AI play a major role in that? Because it sounds like that would be something that you and the industry would come up with to help the OEMs in their manufacturing and design of clubs.
I want to say, like, the short answer is like, yeah, 100%.
Just to give people listening or watching an idea of where that would be implemented, or an example.
Yeah, it's 100%. And I prepared just some visuals here, and I hopefully will come up right here so that the people listening to us or watching us will be able to see as well. Because I thought this could be, I'm sorry, I'm looking at on my other screen here. Just give me a second here. Hopefully I can do that smoothly.
So if you're listening, maybe check out, this will be on YouTube, of course, on our YouTube page. So check it out on YouTube, and you'll be able to see the graphs or charts and data that Ismail's going to show everybody.
Yeah, and it's worth having a look, right? And because I knew a little bit where we were going to go with some of the conversation, or I think some key topics, and I want to answer your question, Pete, with few things here. So when you look at club head design, right? And you think about what everyone is trying to achieve, right? Is to be the best product out there, and looking at it from now the consumer perspective, we hear about forgiveness being one of the main driver, right? And so, and you mentioned mass and all the consequences it could have on ball flight and spin and all these things. So how do these requirements affect the design of a product, of the next generation, of the upcoming ones? Well, basically, there are so many things that influence a design. I listed few of them here. Mass is one of them. Like, where do I put mass? So where is the center of gravity? But it's also durability. I don't want it to break. I don't want it CG. It's the acoustic, the feel, the perceived quality of things, right? What, depending on which club I'm looking at, a loft has will affect different characteristics, spin rates and all that. So when you take all these things together, this is what will be, we talked about data before, right? This amount of data is what we can bring in our technology. So when you say our technology, Altair is one of the key provider for the industry in using data to drive design, to do AI-driven type of decisions. So what you're looking at here, and let's be creative. You've all seen the face of a club, right? And what happens behind the face of a club? What's behind there? Well, it's all type of structure, and all that type of structure could be built in different ways. And the way it would look a certain way is because we put in data about which type of swing and which impact locations and which coefficient of restitution do I want to have, etc., to drive a certain design decision. We talk about topology optimization. This is for people that want to keep looking. It's about generating designs based on a certain constraints and objectives. I want to achieve this in my club face, knowing this objective and this objective and this constraint. So I can drive this. So looking at this now, imagine when these parameters, I go back to the parameters that influence. If I were to change the priority of these parameters, so like, listen, I don't care about the acoustics and the feel. I just want to have high spin or low spin or control my spin, and COR should be average because this product line is targeting a certain audience. I will have a different design. AI will generate a different design for me. Those algorithms will work differently and make it be creative in a different way. Because this is what AI is about creativity. It's about filling the gaps, filling the blanks based on data. And this is, I want to say, this is nothing new. This has been for many years. I put an example here. We worked with our friends at Cleveland for many years. Dustin Breakey, they use our technology to do exactly the same. Is it on the face or is it on the sole of the club to improve turf interaction or mass location? The rest of the industry is not different. And I know that our audience is very well educated. Look at all big manufacturers. They are all coming up with all these different variants. Why? They are addressing the different populations and different needs, but they are also driving these designs with different set of data. I wanted just to close the loop there, that data is driving the design, but it's also the outcome at the end of the day. I hope this makes sense. And this is really across the industry.
So as the first thing we talked about is that input data can obviously is going to have a great effect on the result that the AI gives or the conclusion. Mm-hmm. And with all the different manufacturers, if they're all inputting their data, and there's going to be differences because they're probably taking different test subjects and they have their ways of doing things. So is that what is separating the difference from manufacturers as far as their driver and their design?
I think there are obviously commonalities, right?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of commonality, especially with the COR and the regulations USGA put in place. There's this. They have to fit in this box. You can't go outside of these lines. Absolutely. So within those parameters, they have to all design within that regulation.
100%. So the commonality is there, and the rules are in some sense kind of put them in a box, right? Mm-hmm. But if you, in my conversation with some head of R&Ds in this different OEMs, when you hear them talk, they will tell you there is a huge potential still. Huge potential. And if we just I go back to the face optimization. It's a common thing. I think a lot of the audience hear about that. It's part of the marketing message as well. We hear that face, new materials, new technology, and all that. What happens with face technology and coefficient of restitution? So basically, in simple words, how much your face is allowed to flex at impact, to restitute energy, right? This is where the regulation comes from, right? Today, or in the past 10, 15 years, everyone knows how to optimize it for a sweet spot impact location. And this is driven by tour players, right? They're probably the only one that can control that. You and me and whoever around are like, we don't touch that. We are lucky when we touch it. So back to that phase, that 90% zone around that sweet spot. What about it? That's where the potential is. This is now how the combination of collected data, but also created data. And I can come back to that later on the created data. The data from the field is telling me how many are hitting it outside of that sweet spot, how many are hitting it where, and how they are hitting it will help me as an OEM, as an engineer to go and put the right inputs and conjugate that or use all these new manufacturing techniques, all these advanced engineering capabilities that are now available and were not available 20 years ago to create that next generation. Everyone is talking just about that. Oh, now you can hit it off the toe. It's still as good as hitting it on the sweet spot, depending who hits it, right?
Yeah.
Depends who hits it. So that's a very important element to keep in mind. And I talked about the data element, the input. So the Tiger Woods, the John Rams, the whoever that are swinging in a certain way, that are giving input to all these manufacturers, right? What about if you had different ways you could generate your data to design your club for the bigger masses, if I may say so? And this is I hope people would come and see us on YouTube because they don't want to miss what we are showing here.
Well, it's interesting you're going to bring this up because I think what you're getting at, so there is what the data input says, and then the OEMs or the designers try to design ahead around that. Is what we've been talking about. But I think what you're going to get into is what, let's say, physics says, here's how you would design ahead to maximize optimization. So face squaring up, launch angles based off X speed, spin rates, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to allow the golfer to not have to manipulate, meaning if you move weight too much one towards the toe or the heel or up or down, it's going to cause a reactionary movement in someone's golf swing. So physics knows, largely based off a fairly competent swing, how a club head will design along the path that it moves. So I think what you're about to get into, if I can do the introduction or preface it to those listening, is the created data is what we know from science, from a physics standpoint and things like that, to say, here's what is known in the scientific world. And now, but the data that's collected is, how are people reacting to these things, that we're going to collect that. And then it's going to be an amalgamation of both of those things, I would have to assume, together, and then determining which one you give more weight to.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of points in what you just said there, Pete. So absolutely, there is data, the data, the reactional data. But let's think about how I can go, imagine a future where I could go and collect data so that I almost do what I would call a fully customized design process for a specific use case or individual, right? So, and what we, and again, we could go in different tangents here, but imagine one thing here. I wanted to show that today we have the capability to take motion capture data. Imagine these are all sensors. It's a human body moving, right? I can take that from the real world and feed it into a virtual world. Now I have my mannequin. I have my John. Now this guy exists only in a computer. However, I make him, her move so that I can use this data in a computer to now feed the design of a club. I now can put any club in his hand. This is just the way he moves, right? And now I can put any. So what it enables me down the road, right? And I go back to that, what influences the design of the part? And you were touching to it, right? You were saying like,
Hmm.
I have all this historical data, but can I improve this data by bringing a new type, a new set of data? Someone that shallows or someone that comes too steep or someone that is just in plane. Those are different swings. Do they require a different club? Do they require different mass in this club? Do they require different law? What do they require? Can I design a head that is more optimum for these people? This is what we can do actually. So now we can conjugate, bring these two worlds together purely virtually. And to be clear for the audience, when I say virtually, this is physics-based approach. It's not, I want to say it's not a game. It's not just a simulation. It's physics-based motion and it's physics-based mechanical engineering and advanced mechanical engineering coming together and saying, this is how things could look like and should look like if you want to reach an optimum for this particular individual, for example. That's to me moving towards the future. This is also what correlate with aerodynamics, right?
Hmm.
Now, depending on how I swing, I might generate too much drag in my transition versus close to impact, or vice versa. So, do I want the same car? Do I want the same head? No. I might need something different, a different feature, a different design feature that will allow me to be more optimal. I hope this makes sense.
Well, it does, because I've had enough exceptional people on the show that, and like Dr. Scott Lynn, Scott Cowks, who is Canadian PGA Teacher of the Year, all these super highly smart people who are doing all this data research. And there is no question that we live in the data world, and there are mountains and mountains of information and data that is collected and sitting there. And the one thing that they have all said to me is that I asked them, because it was my thought process or theory, was with all this data collection and the ability to measure and do everything, we're figuring out, number one, that people are different. So we knew that going in. You can't just stick somebody into a type and say, well, that's how they have to perform, because not everybody is the same. We knew that going in. But what we're finding out, at least in the golfing world, I would have to say fundamentally in every industry, is how do we optimize it for this particular individual or this particular entity? So whether somebody is supposed to shift more pressure, is it supposed to stay more on the front leg throughout the course of the swing, or should it shift more to the back leg? There's ways to measure that now. And what I saw on the charts and the pictures that you just showed is, and what I think you were saying is, based off of somebody's individualistic swing, whether they have a more shallow attack or they're more steep, you can design a head that will optimize them to the max of the ability of the information that everyone has now, that they can pick up a few miles an hour. And if you're figuring on a driver, every mile an hour equates to roughly 2.5 yards. If they can pick up 3, well, there's 7.5 yards of carry. And whether you're a once a weeker and you're playing with your friends and you can outdrive them by up to 10 yards, or you're on the PGA Tour or the LPGA Tour and you're trying to carry a bunker where your competition's having to lay up. I mean, that's very big. So is that, do I have that somewhat correct?
Absolutely. And if you look at me as let's say a passionate technologist and a consultant to the industry, and where do I see things moving forward with this more advanced and advanced manufacturing techniques? You hear about 3D printing and all these approaches that allow for more flexibility. I think, and that we'll be going to this customizable design of consumer products in general. And same with golf for golf, is if I have reduced mobility, right? I can't rotate like JT or whoever out there.
Like
I
Rory,
I can
Dustin
I
Johns, you're
can
not going to be able to
if I
turn.
do a Rory swing here, I might call 911 right away. I lost my back. Sorry, goodbye. It's the end. So, but I would love to have his feel. I would love to do something right. I want life to use a technology that allows me to come close to it from a golf performance perspective. How do I do that? The
Yeah,
equipment needs to
maximize.
help me.
Yes, maximize the person what they have to work with. How do you maximize that?
Absolutely. And this is where I think we'll offer the opportunity to coaches and fitters out there to know that, listen, I'm not stuck just with this head or this shaft. Now I have an additional element where I can have the swing pattern tendency and I can combine it to a customized technology. I think manufacturers might take that directions by themselves. The same way you can order a different color in your head today. It might be like, send us your swing. And we know that a lot of apps out there and all these things, it's easy to do it from home. Swing, send us your recording, and we'll put you on the right thing, or we will develop something customizable for you.
Mm-hmm.
Data will help us do that. We will engineer it for you.
It seems to be the way that the world is moving because Jason Hyland from Sub 70 is coming on next week,
Right.
and he, he not to get into too far off tangent, but Jason worked at SMT back in the 90s, and then I think it was Diamond something golf that he started, and then Hurricane Golf, which was an online supplier, a component supplier, if I'm not mistaken, and then he started Sub 70. But that's a direct to consumer, and he got the idea when he had ordered a high end suit that send in his measurements, I believe, and they sent him a suit, and he was very blown away by the quality of the suit that he received, and I think he had to have it tweaked a little bit here or there by his local tailor, but they kind of saying you that they get very close, and they say if you want to make the fine adjustments, here you go, but the price compared to him having to go to a very high end men's clothing store was like 1/5 or 1/10, so it was like, wow, I can get this quality for this. So, and where I'm going with this is, one of these companies is going to figure out taking what you guys do and being able to order the clubs that you want, that fit everything that you're doing, given a mobility and physical standpoint and a swing standpoint. And then I would have to assume if your swing and your fitness change and your body and your swing change, that you'll have the option to trade out or adjust your clubs. But the only challenge I see, and I'm not in that inside the industry at all, is how do they control the inventory levels? Because you would have to carry a lot of inventory, but I would have to imagine that 3D printing at some level would play a larger role where they don't have to carry the inventory. They can have somebody send their order in, and within X amount of time, it gets printed, made, and then sent right back. But it is fascinating.
So you're touching a very important point. So I want to go back on two things. Number one, look at all manufacturers. All manufacturers are working closely now with data collection suppliers. You could plug in a sensor to your club and it comes for free, or subscription for the first year is for free, or the device is for free, and it will help you improve your golf. You collect data. At the end of the day, that data, when whatever you sign and agree on at the end, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that data becomes public, becomes available. Maybe your name is not on it, but you are X handicap and you swing these clubs this long with this accuracy, and all that data will be available. That data will be available for purchase. That's enhancement of the data set that every OEM has already with their Tour Pro and their semi-professional players that come and test every prototype. Now they have the enhanced data from the amateurs. That will go in, that will factor in designing the next generation of products. No doubt. That's number one. The number two, you talked about the manufacturing and the inventory and all that. Very valid point. However, I again, I look at a 20 years old driver or wood. There were maybe 4 or 5 parts at top, stick glued together, whatever it is. Right now, it's 15, 20 parts. Everything moves, everything adjusts, everything can be swapped, everything. Right. So it's that versatility and this new manufacturing technologies that are enabling for new stuff. Right now, even a putter is adjustable. I think TaylorMade came out with the latest, where you can adjust your CG, right, back and forth, changes your MOI, and great. That's 4 or 5 additional parts in a putter that used to be like a single part thing. So inventory could be solved with that. Might start limited, but it's easy to grow it if you bring that into the design process and product development process as early as possible.
Do you think that let's use TaylorMade as an example, because they're known to roughly every 6 to 9 months come out with a new driver, and a lot of the other manufacturers seem to be on a yearly basis. So do you think that the industry is going to gravitate more towards the TaylorMade model, where they're coming out with drivers faster as AI is used more readily and becomes more efficient, and things are better understood, and the data that's gathered is showing everybody that, hey, look, we've got through the course of the collection of this and analyzing this, we found out a new thing that can help this segment of the golfing population. So do you think that drivers are going to start to come out more often along the TaylorMade model, or do you think that it will continue, or is it just the process right now takes about that amount of time that it's going to stay at about 1 time per year for new product release? Or does it even take longer, and they're just coming out with some things that say, hey, this is going to give you 5 more yards, even though they're capped on the COR and the regulations?
So I think there are 2 elements in that. There is the business side of things. If TaylorMade or whoever start coming out with a product every 8 months, 9 months, 6 months, 7 months, who knows, right? The competition has to react. You want to be on the shelves. You want to be there. You want to be with your marketing and talking about your product as well. Otherwise, you get forgotten, right? So I'm not a specialist in that. It's not. I will leave that. Now let's look at the technology side. And this is a 5-second quiz even for the audience, right? It's like, how much time does it take to concept, design, build a car? 2, 3 years. That's the design side. So from that concept, matured concept, and I start designing out of production. How much time does it take to design a set of clubs? We're talking about clubs, right? 9 to 14 months, depending on the manufacturers. So there was one element. Look at a car, how many parts you have in a car, how many people versus a club. Why does it take so much time for clubs? Because it's high tech. Everyone should understand there is a lot of technology that goes behind designing and optimizing club and golf products. That's very important. So it takes time. Now, every industry out there wants to go faster. It's lead time reduction while increasing quality, while decreasing cost and increasing margin. This is the equation of the market. So are OEMs out there trying to go faster? Yes. Will they be able to go faster? Oh, hell yes. Will AI and data-driven type of decision, simulation, high-performance computing, help them go there? Oh, yes. It's the only way. Because when we talk about these things, what's happening behind the scenes? What we are doing is we are bringing virtual engineering into the picture. All the images I showed before, all those graphs I showed before, those are physics-based AI models and design that are analyzed and virtually analyzed before being built. So I'm eliminating the time and the cost for building a prototype, a physical prototype, and literally call or make Tiger fly or Rory fly to come and test it and tell me it's no good, or my John and whoever, my semi-pro, come and test it. No, we do that on a computer. It takes minutes, it takes hours, it takes days versus weeks and months. It's the only way moving forward. So I am sure that we will see faster and faster release times, right? Maybe now it's still a little bit, to my taste, it's still a little bit of a marketing, right? We're tweaking certain things. The latest feature that I couldn't squeeze in at the last release date, I now can make it 6 months later. The latest carbon fiber, the latest part and geometry have been finally optimized. Everything fits. Okay. 6 months from now, release the next one. But in the future, we might see some even more radical changes in performance and design because of this acceleration of data-driven, AI-driven type of decision-making.
Yeah, I would have to say of all the variables involved that we've been discussing on how you can move center of gravity and the variables that you had on a driver head that on the chart, that a whole nother segment that brings in its own laundry list of variables would be the materials that are used. We went from metal head or wood to metal, then metal to titanium to composite, which is kind of where we're at now. And I mean, composites come a long way, so that's a whole separate section of the process that is advancing at their pace. But I'll give an example. Back in 2001, I think was the first time I saw the first composite head. Callaway had it. But if there was a problem, it was swing speeds that were very high, let's say around the 120 mark back then. The faces would cave in, within probably less than 100 balls. Let's just use 100 as a barometer. So they didn't have no one really adopted or gravitated them at that level. I mean, I think that the general public was using them, but it's taken really, I think, until the Stealth last year that was the first composite style head that really took, that the public took to, as well as, I mean, Tiger played it, Rory's playing it, Morikawa, all the TaylorMade staff guys were playing it all last year, and they didn't switch. So if you're using it for your career and your livelihood and you're not switching, it's got to have some relevancy. Now, some might argue, well, they're getting paid for it and they have to play contractual obligations. That, yeah, but when you're playing for millions of dollars, I'm sure that you're going to have the option to switch to a different one of their products if it's not performing, at least to a certain criteria. So that's interesting to follow as well. And I say that only because I remember watching a TED Talk many, many years ago about one of the investors, where they call them the groups that go in and they'll fund companies as startups. Venture capitalist. He's a VC.
Okay. Yep.
So he had this list, like 50 companies that he said, based off of capital raised, the product they had, the team they had behind it, and this whole laundry list of things that he thought they were going to be grand slams. He had no doubt in his mind, and none of them made it. They all flopped within a couple of years. And then he had a smaller list, and on that list at that time, and this was a number of years ago, it was like Yahoo and a whole bunch of companies that were household names at the time. And he said, these I thought were okay, but nothing compared to the ones I thought would be grand slams. So he started looking at the differences between the two. And timing was as important a variable as capital, people behind it, staff, employees, the whole thing. Because if the market wasn't ready to receive it and other parts of the industry that contributed weren't on par or along those same lines, then it never got going. And so that's why I bring up the material aspect, and especially on drivers. And we seem to be in the composite era right now. So we'll see how that works out. You might know more about that than I do, but I'm looking at that from one side. You're obviously on the inside more on that than I am.
Yeah. Well, materials are a very important element. I mean, now, Carver, you think about when you look at the messaging that TaylorMade had, because you're talking about TaylorMade, right? I think from an engineer perspective, right, I was like, okay, great technology advancement, right? It's a paradigm shift. It's bold, right? But there was this reassuring message. We've been working, I quote, we've been working on this for 20 years. Mm-hmm. We took our time to come out with it. Is it 20? Is it 15? Is it 10? Is it 5? I don't know, right? But there is an element of credibility. And I say it as an engineer, and I say it as an Altairian, as an Altair person. And why? Because we've been in the business for almost 40 years. We started in the consultancy of the automotive industry and aerospace industry. And aerospace and carbon and composites in general, it's one story, right? Mm-hmm. So we've seen and we participated and we helped develop some of the most advanced virtual engineering methods and tools and technologies to drive that renaissance of materials in some sense, that it has to go there. It's the only way moving forward, right?
I've said for years that the biggest benefactor of the reduction in NASA, when the NASA mm-hmm. got their funding cut, was it 20 years ago? The biggest, maybe it's longer, biggest benefactor of that industry or that thing happening was the golf industry. Because a lot of those engineers and material people all moved mm-hmm. into the golfing world. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And look at the advances we've seen in the last 20, 25 years. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah. I remember, you mentioned Callaway earlier, right? I remember reading about an article where they clearly stated that the whole, when they understood that virtual engineering and data-driven type of design process is required to go faster and to create better product. Where did they look at? They turned to the other industries, aerospace industry, and hired people from this industry to come in with that fresh mind mm-hmm. unbiased. I don't care about golf. I just want to make a better product. Tell me what the product is supposed to do. And let me drive that. Let me stretch the boundaries of what's possible. Allow me to go and see what other materials can do, gradually integrating them, right? Because the name of the game is allow me as a design engineer, as a responsible for this product, to position the center of gravity where I want to. This is what clubhead design is all about at the end of the day, roughly. Let me put that mass where I want to. And the only way you can do it is that if you have versatility in how you design and manufacture, and in more complex product like a head or the driver head or wood, is play with different materials, put them together, right? So it's there. Key element, other industry engineers, experts, domain experts, specialists coming into the golf industry and injecting that aerospace knowledge, basically. And if I want to brag here, our technology is the foundation to it. We talk about Altair OptiStruct. It's the leader technology out there that enables doing some of the most exciting stuff. Used in aerospace, used in the automotive, used in the golf industry, used in the consumer goods, and you name it.
So you guys do head design. We talk a lot about driver heads in particular. we'll get into maybe irons a little bit, but you also do shaft design, if I'm not mistaken. You do a lot of consulting on shaft design.
We do work through manufacturers or sometimes through the suppliers. As you know, manufacturers could put their specs out there. It's like, I want to achieve this and that. I want to send specs, but tell me what I should send. And this is where we can use the same technology. Yeah.
When I was in that field, there was obviously the steel was obviously very big, and I think the industry is transitioning more to graphite, because graphite, the ability to make it as a material that works equally, if not better than steel, I think that technology has caught up, if not surpassed steel. I think that's why a lot of iron shafts now are transitioning to graphite, even at the pro level. I mean, DeChambeau was one. LA Golf is what he was playing, and I guess he's switched now. I haven't seen a number of other players have gone to graphite iron shafts, but at the time that I was in it, it was steel, it was table rolled graphite, which was what the overwhelming majority of graphite shafts were, and then there was filament wound, which was, as you know, it's more like a tissue that's stretched. It's not rolled up like traditional graphite shafts would be rolled, table rolled, meaning they're made like a cigar. Basically, it's a piece of graphite that's rolled, and then that's how the shaft is designed. But filament wound is one piece graphite as it's stretched, if I'm not mistaken. So the tolerances on the filament wound were much tighter, which means they performed better. Now, again, this is going back roughly 15 years ago. But there are obviously advances in graphite technology. As we've stated, with AI being a part, everything is rapidly moving faster. As far as that, and so why I explain that is the playability factor of a steel shaft versus a table roll versus a filament wound was the frequencies would be different to play the same and to feel the same to the golfer. I believe it was about nine cycles per CPMs different. So a 300 steel shaft would be in a driver, let's say a 250 in a flex in filament wound would be, you'd need 259 in table rolled, and you need 268 in steel for all in the playability to be the same. Is that still one of the factors in play or do you not even get into that? You're just helping design the shaft or give them input on how it functions.
We are not in that side of the spectrum. So, okay. But again, it's one of these things where we understand where the OEM or supplier wants to go. We help them build those pieces of the puzzle that are before that. We help them create those virtual models that can allow them to study variations.
Mm-hmm.
So, I showed you just club heads, but the same we do with a club head, I can put the virtual shaft there, and I can change its material. I can roll it. I can go into all creativity so that I can allow all these engineers to now study the combination of head plus shaft. This is where the versatility comes in. Eigenfrequencies, which relate to feel and sound and all these things at the end of the day. In full honesty, until now, we haven't been exposed to those details you just mentioned. We're helping, though, the OEMs build those standards to investigate things themselves, to quickly say, and I go back to the example I said, for this player, when he or she swings like this, what works better? Where do I need the flex? Where do I need the rigidity? Where do I need the feel? These are the things that could be investigated with those models and with that data-driven approach. This is where we are right now.
So as far as the shaft process, if XYZ shaft company comes to you guys and say, we want you to help with the development, and here's where we are right now in our process, what else do you provide to them? Is it do you say if you modify the bend point, or if you modify the kick by X amount, then it's going to appeal to this type of golfer, or how does that work? Can you just walk down that road a little bit?
Sure. There would be different level of engagement possible, right? Depending where they are in what we call their virtual engineering capabilities. So in simple words, do they even do digital simulation? Do they do anything digital at all? Or they are all in the I have an intent, I go down to the lab, I build it, I test it, right? So element number one is to introduce digitalization. We enable them to have now what we call a digital twin of their product. You probably heard about this term. Digital twin is just one of the chapters of AI driven process, right? So we create a virtual representation, physics based, of the product you intend to build. Now, when I have this digital version, I can allow you, and we will allow this shaft manufacturer to say, well, what type of models do you usually create? What are your main objectives, constraint, design variables that you use and you try to achieve? And we can help them build virtually all these models. We can help them build those virtual shafts. We can help them analyze their performance, but most importantly, optimize them. And if I spend a minute on this to say optimize them, what does it mean? We all can use our experience to say, hey, last time I built a shaft, I do this and that, and it gives me what I want. Great. Iteration, and I do 3-4 iterations and I get it what I want. When I optimize, I enable computer, and again, AI, to help me based on the constraints and objectives I have to generate the most suitable design. Something maybe I've never thought about, just because we're humans, right? We have a brain and sometimes we'll limit ourselves based on what I have down there at the lab, because it's all I can create. But what if I could do it differently? This is how it would look like. Now, the engineer has always the ability to make a decision, to fine tune, to manually fine tune and dictate what this design should look like at the end. So if a shaft manufacturer comes to us, we digitalize, we help build those digital twins, and we create the link between the virtual and the real, the test lab, the physical part.
How many of the companies that you work with put you to the test that when you build the digital twin, that they obviously they hire you because they believe you're competent and they want your help. But how many of them have that 1 ounce of doubt that they want to see if what you actually produce is what they think is going to happen? Does that happen at all? Where you can, I guess there's no measurement of it, but you can kind of see it on their face when you sit down at the table and everyone's gathered together and they're like, yeah, here's the result and here's what we did. And they're like, yeah, they're just nodding their head like, yeah, you prove to them that this is legit. It's not some dog and pony show.
So it's a very good question in the sense where, okay, how credible are you guys? How is this technology? How all these? Right. So
because there got to be some doubters.
Of course.
They're just like Moneyball, right? There was the old school baseball scouts, and then there was the Moneyball idea, and they just batted head. I'd imagine some of the engineers at these companies that are old school don't want to go to maybe the AI, and they're going to put you guys to the test the best that they can to see if it works or they're trying to trip you up somehow.
Yeah. Well, if we had this conversation 15 years ago or 20 or even 30 years ago, there would be a lot of doubters. Even like an impact analysis or a 3-point band would be like, oh, what are you doing? Why are you mulling? I don't believe that. 15 years ago, I remember sitting down showing some simulation pictures and people were like, oh, you guys can put green and red wherever you want to. I don't like that. I don't want to believe that. I want to go and test it myself. Respect that. Now, if we're talking today, I would say it depends on the disciplines and the physics we are talking about. If we're talking frequency analysis, the technology is is well spread, well proven, used, no problem. That's okay. It's like writing my name and surname, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's on the new technologies. When we talk about aerodynamics, people will challenge you, right? People will really want, it's like we can do a lot in aerodynamics, but it's that 80-20, right? If I want to use simulation, digital twin, AI-based approach for aerodynamics to decide between a design A and B, everyone can do it. But if I want to use aerodynamic CFD analysis to do validation of a product or a design, it requires expertise. It requires the right technology. It requires real work, hand-in-hand work, right? Earlier, we talked about Gulf OEMs bringing experts from the industry. Recently, you probably saw the series that Titleist did on the 5-6 episodes that they launched about what did they call it? This designed farther or something. I don't want to misspell it. Did it something. We go farther. We go farther. I wanted to get it right. The reason I'm very specific here because they talking about it and they hired the professor Steve Hogg, CFD expert from the aerospace industry, more than 30 years experience. They talk about it. Very nice video, by the way. How he came in to really look at this aerodynamics for their TSR driver, right? The next generation and the implementation required and all that, right? So if you go and talk to OEMs about this very niche, very advanced application, they will challenge you because there are certain things we're still trying to validate with the real science, right? Another
Mm-hmm.
one is turf interaction. We can simulate turf interaction. How a wedge goes into the sand, I just because these are very cool stuff. I would love to show you this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give me a second here. So Golf had interaction with soil, and now we all know about a lot of stories there. But look, we all know about the complexity and the requirement of a certain club head, the bounce, and all these things, and how they would interact with the soil to get the performance we want, right? So how can I bring that in my design process and make the right decisions? Well, we have this type of technology, and I'm skipping through of these things just to show that we can go in and simulate that robot or that player swinging in a certain situation with a certain situation for the ball and all that, and replicate all these situations and bring in different type of sands. Are you in England? Are you down in Florida? Or are you here in Southern California, right? Different conditions, humidity, all these things could be brought in, again, part of the data aspect. And you'll be asking me, so what do I do with this? Well, I can go and simulate all that. So I can decide and I can look on how a club and a ball and a sand are interacting. And I can virtually measure things the way I want. Could look at divot pattern. How deep does a certain club, a certain design dives into the sand, etc. But most interestingly, I could go now, what is very important in this type of analysis, for example, is that I can go and, for example, let's say change the bounce or the leading edge or the the the
Heel,
grooves,
yeah, the heel drag is a big one.
any of these design parameters. I can open the face, I can close the face. I don't need my torque layer to be with me, giving me all these, doing it for me in the sand, and me not able to see all this data. And I can interrogate what happens. This is extremely powerful. We're putting this type of technology in the hand of engineers and designers to make better decisions. And I can look instantly, I can look in my computer and say, let's look at a different scenario. What happened when I hit them fat? I hit too far behind the ball. How does this influence the impact quality and the launch angle and whatever is required, right? So I just wanted to show this because if you were to compare this type of technology and the adoption of this type of technology compared to aerodynamics or impact simulation in the industry, the rate of adoption is not the same. These are the next steps. These are the upcoming technologies that will come in the development cycle. And they do have their doubters. They have people like, oh, I love this, but wait a second. Let's make sure it adds value, and let's make sure that the physics is right. So we have some very interesting interactions and conversations with the industry around technologies like these and others, where bringing data, because this is, again, it's data and how you can extract a lot of information from it for, at the end, make sure that you're designing a better product. That's always the goal at the end of the day.
You guys do, and there was a Forbes article that it was discussed with you, and they believe Cleveland Golf was a noted company in that article. Correct. Are there certain companies that seem to lean on your information more than others, where others might be a little stubborn or want to keep things maybe more in-house, close to the chest on their technology and what they're working on? They don't want it to be leaked out, whether it's on purpose or not. But do some companies seem to utilize and listen to you more than others, or is it somewhat of a normalcy across the board for the industry?
I want to say that we are a trusted partner, and we've always been for 30 years, more than 30 years now, to the industry. And we've been engaged in different forums, in different ways, with different manufacturers at different stages of their product, sometimes at the conceptual level, sometimes at the validation level. And sometimes the same customer could be very open on certain information on a certain program and less open on other. And we always respect that. And we understand, because we've been in the industry for long enough to understand that there is something that they cannot even take the risk to come up, right? Mm-hmm. And we treat that very seriously, of course. I want to say, however, we always have the position of a consultant. And as everyone knows, consultant is someone you come in, you want to hear our opinion, our honest opinion. And you are, at the end, the customer is the decision maker there. And mm-hmm. be like, I like your idea. I didn't think about it. I'm running with it. And thank you. By the way, I'm calling you next week because this other topic. Or I can connect you with the colleague. You got to talk to them. If you guys can do this, you're going to help us on the other challenge. Great. Sometimes we're looked at and we're like, no, not possible. They could give us sometimes the reason, manufacturing can do that, or there's this other constraint you guys don't understand that we cannot, this is why we cannot implement this and this. Or sometimes you just, no. I'm not telling you why, but I'm not. Maybe they tried it, right? Or it's not better than the idea they have. And again, we respect that, because I want to say we are still outsiders. We are technology and expertise providers. Mm-hmm. The OEMs, we respect the grind and the experience they have in that domain, where we cannot develop golf clubs. They can. We can provide a lot of help around that. But I want to say 100% successful collaboration all the time when we're touching into processes, lead time reduction, automation around digitalization. That's one thing. Sometimes the idea is not taken in. However, the process is highly appreciated. Oh, we can work this way. We want to take that in. So
yeah, because you're making their process, whether they listen to your recommendation on a particular thing to do. So whether they take that or not, I would have to think that at least the efficiency that you and direction you can provide them based off the amount of data that you're able to simulate, they are extremely appreciative of the time reduction from wherever they are in their concept, whether it's idea, concept, prototype, testing, manufacturing, all those things across that lifespan of a product, that they're very appreciative that they can shrink that down from what used to be maybe a couple years to, as you said earlier, 9 to 14 months. So you're cutting their time by 66% at minimum, and probably more on certain occasions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think it's the main reason these OEMs engage with us. They see the value as technology provider. We provide the software that they use to do this work. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we have that layer of expertise and consultancy. We are the expert in our tools. But even more importantly, we have access to the hundreds of developers that develop this software. What does it mean? It means when there is a missing piece in the technology to achieve A or B, we have access to people that can help us immediately address that. And that's unique in the industry. From a technology provider perspective, we're the only one out there able to combine the consultancy and technology. And that's highly appreciated. It's quite unique in some sense.
Yeah, instead of them going through the trial and error of trying to find somebody, and then they spend X amount of months with them, and then it turns out that they went down the wrong road, and now they got to let that person go or that entity go, and they got to backtrack and back to step one, and like, okay, we're going to start this all over again. Which way do we go? You guys can shorten that time frame because you have this large database of anything that you don't have. You know where to go get it right away. Is that did I have that correct?
Absolutely. With us, basically, you don't need to ramp us up on the technology. You don't need to teach us how to use a screwdriver. We created the screwdriver. We create more screwdrivers that maybe you don't even use. We come in, we pick the screwdrivers, and we start the work. And sometimes you'll be like, oh, let's use a screwdriver. It's like, no, we don't use a screwdriver for that. This is a hammer work. Oh, really? We thought I was going to hammer with the back of the screwdriver. No. You need, and that's very powerful because when we've seen it before, especially from other industries, remember, golf industry went out and hired from automotive and aerospace.
Mm-hmm.
We come from there. We have people that work with very complex, more complex processes, products, technologies, and we come in and they can have access to that. And that's, again, we like to think that we are quite unique with that offering.
Are you able to say, are there any products that when you're with, let's say you're with friends or you're just hanging out and golf's on TV, and there's a club on there that somebody's using and they hit a great shot and you can just sit there and smile and say, I played a part in the development of that club. Are you allowed to say, or first of all, does that ever happen? And if it does, are you allowed to say what club or product that was?
I want to say like every day. And we talked before starting. We were talking off, and I'm telling you, like, passion is what we are. Passionate people. We are
Hmm.
very passionate in our field, and we take pride in that passion in the behind the scenes type of work that we are doing, right? And we wouldn't have the time to go in all the details that are sometimes the essential or part of that journey. And going back to your question, yes, every day there is pride in every product out there. You look at them, it's like, why it's good. You know what it made it out. You and I'm not talking about only golf, because I see people in their cars and it's like, I know why this car is out there as well. My team or my colleagues worked on that one. That golf club, I see it on down the course. You meet another threesome and you're teeing off with them. It's like, what do you have? What's your driver? It's like, oh, okay. I know how it sounds, or I know why it sounds like that. And that's an element of pride. Which ones? I mean, Cleveland, Wilson, Pings, right? I can name those, and a lot that I can't name. But I think there's a lot of pride there, and I'm sure, and I'm not taking that away from the people really working 100% on these products, but we feel that we are part of the journey with the technology we provide, or the consultancy advisory that we bring as well on the table.
Yeah, Ping is very good. I mean, I've had Dr. Paul Wood on, Eric. What is it? Eric? Is it Anders or Anderson? I cannot remember his name. I'm trying to work a schedule out with him to come on from Ping. I think that they have a very good design team, and that's got to feel pretty cool that you like know the inside scoop when you're playing with your friends or at a tournament, and people say, "Man, I just love this club." I say, "Yeah, I know. You like it because of this." Like, how do you know that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any
Yeah.
are there any situations? And I'm only going to ask this question because obviously it was all over social media last night and this morning. How not necessarily this morning, but as the Players Championship started, that Colin Morikawa went back to his old sim driver from the Stealth 2. And are there, so that got me thinking about the question, are there times when you can see something like that, or in another realm when someone is hitting shots or they don't like a club, and you're thinking to yourself, well, if they XYZ company would have listened to the input that we gave them, they would not have had this problem. Are there some times that you come across that too?
Yeah, we've had situations like that, and I'm not talking about the particular of Colin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though I might guess why and all these things, but in general, right? As I was saying before, we advise, we give, we would sometimes we would even propose our help, and they would be like, no, we don't need your help on this, right? And we back off. That's fine. And you in your head is that, I wish they listened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wish they will listen. And then when you see the product come out, and you're like, you're in that phase, like, wondering, did that go in or not? Did that make it or not? And based on what you see, say, oh, it didn't happen. I wish it happened, right? Now, I go back to one of the early points we discussed: timing, complexity of the products they are doing, and the competitive aspect and lead time. It's a lot going on. Bringing advanced materials into the picture requires more testing, will require more testing and more fidelity, building more fidelity in this virtual models and this
Because a
AI
lot of it's
models, right?
if it's new material, it's unknown, so you're going to have to test it more to see what the reaction is.
Absolutely, right? And you would have those unknown use cases, right? And the guy that swings a little bit faster, right? Oh, now he picked up more speed. Oh, but he doesn't fit the scheme anymore, or he's hitting it too much here instead of here. I didn't plan for that. Whatever. All these new scenarios are great to feed in the new design, but sometimes they can hurt the old design, right? Because, well, I didn't know that.
But yeah, I guess that the prime example of that would be about a year and a half ago when DeChambeau, who was obviously had changed his swing and he was swinging so fast that and his the angle of attack, the launch, everything had changed, and he had been working with Cobra engineers to get the driver to where his misses were not so exaggerated. And I mean, he threw them under the bus is what he did. And I think it was the British Open, one of the tournaments where he said, we've been working on this and they just can't get it to where if I just miss it by the little bit, they can't keep it in play. It's like, well, you're swinging number one out of your shoes. But would that be an instance of the technology it's something that's so new that even the AI has not caught up to the ability because it doesn't have enough data input, if we go back all the way to the beginning, that no one really knows how to solve that problem yet because it's the prototype of the problem?
It's actually, in simple terms, it's yes, there is not enough data, or it's a use case that have not been considered, right? If I'm designing something, I go back to, if you remember, I was talking about all these parameters that can influence the design of a face, because it goes back to face optimization. I design it for a certain purpose, for COR, for durability, for sound. But now I'm starting to swing, let's say, at a much higher speed. I need to consider that for durability because these are harder impacts and the life might not be 10,000 impacts. It might drop down to 5,000. Is this a problem for me or not? Well, it's just Bryson, right? And I'm just picking Bryson as an example here. It's okay. We change his driver every 2 tournaments. We're fine.
Yeah, so the face isn't going to cave in is what you're getting on face stability.
Yeah. But
eventually it will, but eventually it's going to crack.
Eventually it will.
But it doesn't matter because he's getting a new driver every couple weeks.
He's not the masses, right? No one out there swings that fast. So we can minimize this issue. It's not really an issue. What's the next important thing? Oh, now he swings so fast and maybe the club pad and the head rotation is different than what we know. This is, as an example, I can imagine, right? So now we have a situation where a player, there is a dynamic, and this could be different than Bryson, right? It could be something different. John Ram has a completely different swing pad and all these things. So now we have different dynamics that are creating a different delivery angle, a different motion through the impact zone, etc., etc. So your misses are starting to be exaggerated or completely new. Too much side spin. The ball is taking off right or left. Or whatever. Is it a problem with the technology? No. It's a problem of input. So it goes back to a very fundamental element. It's your first question. It was like, AI, data, isn't it related to the quality of data that I use? The output is directly connected to the quality of the input. Yes. In this case, we didn't or we forgot to take into account X and Y and Z elements. Well, believe me, there is no AI robot or process or machine learning or whatever you want to call it that will imagine something for you or guess that you might have a problem. Might even forget about a problem, but it will not add. It will spit a result that tells you here's what's best for what you told me. So in the future, it will be, this is where the importance of the data element will come in, the quality and how complete the data I will bring in these AI models will be very important. And by AI here, I mean all the different ones. It's the simulation, it's AI-driven, machine learning, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because some of as you talked about collected versus created before, I think the created being the physics side of things, or the scientific side of what is known, or at least thought to be known until something comes along and proves it wrong, is that the ball speeds, once they start getting up to 190 or 190 plus, that the dispersion just becomes too great as far as a playability factor. So if you're in long drive, it really doesn't matter because all you have to do is hit the grid once. But if you're playing for a living and hitting the fairway or relatively close to the fairway, let's say keeping the ball in play becomes somewhat of a priority. Then if physics isn't going to allow it, at least for the time being, until some sort of technology, as we referred to earlier, whether it's material or something else outside the industry, comes in and enhances or gives another solution to the problem, it might just be that there is a cap on it for the time being until it's studied more and that problem can be solved, because there is more in quality data input that allows that problem to be solved.
Absolutely. I mean, 100 whatever speeds they are at now, right? I don't want to say it's a little bit too much, because that bell curve, I don't even know if it's a bell curve. That the distribution of how often do you hit the same shot at that speed. I don't know it, right? But I would love to see it. I would love to see a chart of someone at those 180, 90, 200. When you're in those speeds, how many out of 100 looks the same? I don't know. That creates a very difficult task for the old engineering way of doing it. If I were to sit and say, based on my experience, the club should look like that. No, you never swing that fast, and you never had someone swinging that fast. So your experience is not relevant. We need to bring in data, right? I mean, it's like
telling someone they're irrelevant.
It's irrelevant for this particular task, right? Like,
yes, for this very unique 0.25% problem, that is irrelevant.
And let me correct myself. It's less relevant. Pardon my English here. It's less relevant.
Won't beat you up for semantics.
Sorry. I speak 5 languages. It gets messed up there sometimes. So that's for another time. But all I mean is that it's an incomplete database of experience that you have. You need to complete it with data. So now is the time to collect data. How does this face, how does this driver, how does this club come to impact? And how would that affect the design of that product in the future? It's the huge thing, because that will drive also on durability. If now everyone starts swinging at those speeds, well, they don't get a new driver every 2 tournaments or every 2 weeks. It needs to hold, right? If I add the new materials into it, now
you've completely changed it. You got to almost start over again.
Yes. And there is a cost aspect.
You guys obviously bring a lot of information to the engineering, the golf company's engineering departments. Have you learned, or what have you learned from them in return?
We learn a lot. I think, and I want to say that in all modesty. I mean, we learned much more than we gave, in some sense. But in some, everything we learn is usually something that we will bring in our technology again, as new algorithms, as new solutions possible, as new workflows for design and capabilities in our tools, right? What's always very interesting is producing or designing a car is different from designing a drive. So you can come with that experience. A lot of it is relevant. A lot of it is useful, right? But it's not the same. You need to adapt it. Oh, it's not the same volumes. Therefore, manufacturing techniques needs to be a little bit different. Oh, your inventory looks completely different. Your part is put all manually. Oh yeah, I cannot do it that way. I need to do it the other way. And that affects the way you engineer things. And that affects do I use a hammer or a screwdriver, right? Do I use this tool or the other tool? So I would like to say that it's a lot of complementarity in the way we collaborate and work with the engineers, be it designers, be it analysts, being data scientists at these organizations.
Well, are you able to say, and maybe you don't have to name the company if you can, by all means, but was there something that you remember that stuck with you that you learned from any particular OEM, be it a shaft company or a club company, that you can say that you still that pops into the forefront of your mind today that you could say, yeah, I'll never forget the day that so and so showed me this?
I would. So I'm thinking here, and I'm trying to be a little bit careful here. I might ask you a question as well. So
sure.
I had a great conversation with Dustin Brickey, who is the R&D director at Cleveland Golf. We've had a lot of exchange, and I talk about them because we had the piece, and I can freely talk about our collaboration in some sense. And at some point, I asked him. I said, "Hey, how do you guys test wedges? As you know, they have some of the best wedges in the industry."
I have them.
So
yeah, I know.
You have them. I have my RTX as well. So yeah, so great products. And I showed him, I was showing you earlier the simulation with the wedges and the interaction with the sand, and we had a good conversation. I think one of his questions was like, I would love to see if we could see how much sand is trapped in the grooves, right? And if we were able to do something with those grooves and see the impact it have, I think that down the road when we are ready, we could maybe look at things like that. And I had to ask him back and say, well, wait a second, Dustin, how do you test it today? I mean, how does it go down there at the lab? And he told me something that was very interesting. So I want to ask you, Pete, do you know how they test? They would test, let's say, wet conditions for wedges. Wet conditions, impact, interaction, ball, club.
The only thing I could think of was they would have to have one of the cameras that are doing at least 25,000 frames a second. Now, how they would, and this is just me thinking off the top of my head that they're going to do that, and in some way, shape, or form come up with a calculation that would have a variable to it that they would measure the amount of water still on the face.
Yeah.
Now, that could be way off, but that's just the first thing that pops up in my head. It's from my limited amount of knowledge about it.
I mean, it's the scenario of testing could be something close to that and all that. But the important part is actually how to capture or how to model, right? In a lab situation, let's say you want repeatability and you want to test in 100 shots or thousands of them, the interaction between that face and that ball in always the same conditions. And they were using an approach which, if I'm not sure I can talk, I'm not sure if I can say that. So I'm in a doubt I would not make. But I want to say it's so old school, but also so. Oh yeah, I see where it come from, but I was like, oh, in my world, in my virtual world, I would never go there. I would never use an approach like that or anything like that. I'm sorry. It sounds mysterious and all that. And maybe I can drop a comment later on the podcast or something to let everyone know what it is. But I would like to check with Dustin before. But
well, if it's very basic, then I would have to say, just from my limited amount of going to manufacturers and doing testing of shafts and heads and balls and things like that, would be that they're taking either a stock swing off of a mat and they're using Flight Scope TrackMan quad or whatever they're using to measure the spin rate and the face interaction. Mm-hmm. And then they're maybe taking it somewhat of a generic form of, okay, if we add X amount of sand with X amount size granules, this is an estimation on how it's going to affect the spin. And here's the size of the granule, and here's the size of the grooves, and here's how much could fit in there. And here's a rough estimate or average on what we think it'll take. So it's if it's given the amount of information that they have, it's a good way to come up with a somewhat of an idea of what the friction and the spin would be. But if you can take what you have in the virtual world, I mean, it's horrendously bad way to try to figure something out and apply it in the real world, especially once you're getting to tour pro level when they're, again, playing for their living.
Yeah.
Or even bragging rights for the weekend warrior. I mean, which is almost
exactly
as important to a lot of people.
Absolutely. But it's I mean, I think there are different ways of doing it as well. And their way, I mean, if I were to hint towards something, is that what they would put something on the face of the club, and they would be able to impact with that cover or whatever. And that cover was showing some of the best correlation to, let's say, wet grass being trapped between a club and the ball. And that was giving them very good. And again, look at it. I mean, it would be very hard for me, Ismail, and for us, Altair, a technology provider, to go to Cleveland Golf and say, I think I can teach you how to make better wedges. Right? We can work together in making better products, but I cannot go and tell you, sorry, I'm gonna teach you how to make better wedges. You're already doing a pretty damn good job, right? So, but is there a gap? Is there something you're not able to do today? This is usually our collaboration and approach and conversations, like, where is the gap today? And it's not necessarily short term, it's sometimes very long term. Where are you trying to go? And how fast do you want to get there? And if we have the right technology and the right people, we can help you get there.
Let's take golf, obviously, as a prime example. As AI, as you mentioned, has been being used for at least 20 years. But and because it's relying on input, it's accelerated every year since, and it's gotten very accelerated. Do you think that it's going to become more difficult? No, things are going to somewhat slow down because the ability to get new information is not going to be as readily available. Meaning, 20 years ago and leading up to, let's say, today, as everything was relatively new, there's a flood of information coming in. So your ability to, first, you got to kind of silo everything off, and then, okay, here's what we need. If we use this, you run all the different models and everything else. But if the amount of information is slowed a little bit because there are other sectors of the industry that haven't caught up yet, and that AI will even AI at the rate that it can work at and calculate, that it will have a little bit of a slowdown compared to its past as it starts to age a little bit. Does that make sense? Meaning, like a business that takes off, right? It's new to everybody, so everybody jumps on top of it and they buy it. But as something gets to a certain size and it's growing, even Apple. Remember, for decades, Apple was the thing. But as Apple gets so big, it becomes harder and harder to, one, get engineers who can continually make new products that nobody else has. But as those engineers are spread across Samsung and Tesla wants to siphon off the best engineers to work for them, and all these other companies, there's more competition. Do you see that it's somewhat slowing compared to how fast it's come on? Because there's more competition and there's not as much, you can't collect as much data as you need to constantly feed it. Is that a better way to ask that question?
No, I think so. Yeah, I think it's a very good question in the sense where, yes, as a cycle, as almost as a life cycle, if I
Yeah,
may
life
use that
cycle. Yeah,
term.
that's a better way
There's
to
a
use.
life
Yeah.
cycle to it, right? There will be, at least from what we know, there is always a start and the end, right? There will be an end eventually.
Hmm.
Okay, now what's the duration? I have no idea. I really have no idea, because even when you think about AI and when we say, hey, companies and OEMs and all industries have used, and golf industry have used AI for 20 or 30 years, it's a different shape of it. It's growing, right? It's different type of data, it's different complexity, etc. What we see right now, it's really a booming element of data collection and data diversity. Now data is available to everyone. It's cheap to collect data. It's cheap to monitor things to collect data, and therefore to get even more data. Whereas the challenge is to digest this data,
Hmm.
right? So that might be the slowing element in this whole process, because nowadays, if you read around it, the hardest thing is to find data engineers and data scientists. This is what companies are struggling with. So this, going back to this whole lifespan, life cycle, and duration, I don't know which part. I don't think that data will be the slowing down parameter. It's more maybe the individual and the culture and the paradigm change required to take this data, use it responsibly, uh, synthesize it, make it relevant for all the phases of a product development cycle. That's certain. I mean, there is enough data out there for new players in the market. I mean, Kirkland started making wedges and drivers
Hmm.
and irons, right? There is enough information about how to make a golf club out there, and to try to become a brand out there for a certain consumer population. So we will continue to collect more. Um, how long will we be on this? I don't know. It's a good question, but I don't see it slow down right now. I think even the bigger OEMs are still um, reacting a little bit, still on the reaction mode of data rather than use it proactively. They're going to transform, and they are transforming to embed data to proactively drive things and drive the design. They are in this shifting zone, what I may say so, and then they will have to surf that wave of use data to drive the best design possible until the next thing comes in.
Hmm. Yeah, because as you alluded to, I think it's maybe a bad term, but the best I can come up with at the time. AI has become very malleable in that it's changing so fast, and it adapts to the information that's being given. And because it now, after 20 some years, especially in golf, that people are realizing the more you put in, the better the output, that there's more avenues coming in, and then that's going to change, and it's going to continually evolve. But again, it relies on other segments of things as far as materials and input and contributions from other sectors. It is only limited by those things catching up.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And it's like it's very dynamic. It's still a very dynamic world around. Again, not to repeat myself, but where the data is coming from, the quality, the quantity of the data. I mean, look at places like Top Golf.
Hmm.
I mean, it's 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 a paradise of amateur swing ball flight data collection. This is how I could see it, right? It's an entertainment business, but at the same time, it's a technology gem. If you were able to gather all that and realize, wait a second, how is my product used in reality?
As somebody who's a golfer, and so you enjoy golf, and you're obviously very heavily involved in design, and you know a lot of things about what products and things to use to the betterment of a golfer on a very specified level. So you have a better understanding of that than most people that are out there. To the cynics of the world who might be listening to this and saying, this is all great stuff, and I can see how it's helped, especially because the pros are shooting lower scores than ever, and the competitive level at the PGA Tour, the depth and LPGA, and you pick your tour, Live, DP, Asian, Canadian, South American, all the way from top to bottom. The competition is far deeper than it ever has been in the history of the game. But the cynic might be listening to this and saying, yeah, but the average amateur's handicap still runs around 15 to 18, and their average drive still probably in the 230 to 40 range. So as much advancement as we've had in the game, it appears from the outside to help the elite golfers, but it doesn't appear to be doing a whole lot for the average golfer. Now, I'm sure there are some people from National Golf Foundation and some people who study handicaps and things like that might have some say in that and could elaborate more, and hopefully we can have some of them on. But what would you say in response to someone, the cynic out there that says, yes, you do great things and is advancing it at X level, but for me and for my anecdotal group of friends, we've been shooting 93 for the last 15 years, and we've tried to utilize all the AI and the advancements in technology. What would you say to them? It's very simply, well, you're not using maybe you're not listening to the right AI.
No, far from that. I think, it is we could talk 3 more hours just on this one, right? At least. So my answer will be, say, there are a few different elements into this. Golf is a complex sport. We all know it, right? If you play golf more than 2 times in your life, you understand that you don't play 2 times the same way. The first time you were better than the second, or the second was better than the first one. And it tells you that if you keep increasing that échantillon, that number of time, you will see that it will average something, right? So it's a complex sport. Number 2, it's a complex sport that has multiple dimensions in it. The mental, the physical. I cannot rotate like Rory, so I stop thinking I can hit like Rory, right?
Mm-hmm.
I cannot focus as Tiger, therefore I cannot do what Tiger can do. And when I do it, it's a flop, right? So there's the mental, physical, and equipment part of it. I let people out there decide if it's a third, 80, 20, 0, 10, 10, whatever. Let me zoom in I'm not a coach. I love the game. You can tackle that part, but I will zoom in or talk about the equipment. Let me tell people out there, the work that OEMs and suppliers, manufacturers, material specialists are doing so that we get the material we get, the clubs we have, the shafts we have, the technology that goes into there is amazing. It's a tremendous high-tech world. It's really important for people, and I hope they made it with us until this minute of the podcast to hear this, because it's tremendous advanced tech. What does it mean? It means that every year it's getting better. But for you, for us, the average golfers, to really make sure that we get the best thing for us is go and get fitted. Go and get fitted. And go and get fitted doesn't necessarily mean go and pick the last driver. Just pick the right driver. Be put on the right driver, the right technology for you. Find a good fitter, a good coach that will put you in those things. You mentioned it earlier. Colin Morikawa felt that he wanted to go back to his old driver, or to whichever it is. No harm. He was leading listed at the Players, right? Or Friday, right? I don't know what he's doing today, but it's great. He's putting himself in the best shoes possible. He's picking the right equipment for him. go and do the right thing for yourself as well. It doesn't mean necessarily it's the latest product. It has big chances that it's the latest and greatest, but not always. Find your thing there. Manufacturers are doing a tremendous job getting the right products out there. Go and take advantage of it. Will it change you from a 93 to a 75, shooting every weekend with the buddies on the cart and with a beer maybe? I cannot guarantee that, because there are the two other elements, your body and your mental element. Those ones, I don't think that we engineers or anyone out there in the industry can do for you on that.
No, I tell you, that hits to the genesis of the theory that I'd put together, that golf would be the full entity, the paradigm, and then you'd have what I have seen in particular in this area, and I'm in Hilton Head, and I'm sure some other areas, Florida, Southern California, where you have a fair amount of retirees, Scottsdale area. The next two parts, because this was largely based off the Chinese philosophy of the yin yang. So the next two parts would be playing and enjoyment, because I've seen over years and decades far too many people who retired and now said that they can play golf 5 to 6 days a week, and they can't wait for their game to just flourish, and they're going to go from a 10 to a 2 handicap, and they go the other way because they get so frustrated. So, and then they hate the game, and then, you know, it's a love-hate relationship. So there were two entities of improve yet still enjoy it. And then from there you had the 5 elements, and those are, as you discussed, you have the physical element, and then that was broken down into fitness, nutrition, and things like that. You have the club element, the design, the fitting, the technology, the psychological aspect. Oh God, it was my own master's theory. What was the fourth one? I'm going to draw a blank, but the fifth one was the integration. So at what point does each of those prior 4 need the attention so you can continue on this upward trajectory? And it is a very difficult thing to understand all of those, but more so as we're talking about specificity, which one of those needed the attention at any given time. So yes, that has always been my answer to the question. I'm always curious to hear people who are very good at what they do on their answer to that question, because that does come up quite a bit from, again, usually very cynical types, or people who are very frustrated that they have put the time in and made the commitment, and then they haven't seen the result. It's like, well, that's probably very simple. Out of the entire puzzle, you were most likely missing something, or what you were doing was not, the prescription for that was not correct. And I think that goes across industries, health industry. You know, if you eat salad every day, you know, you're gonna get healthier at first if you're eating McDonald's 6 days a week, or you're eating fast food, and you go to salad every day. Yes, you're going to get healthier, but at some point you're not going to be a healthy person.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I can share my personal experience in a minute, right? I started golf. The first time I held a golf club was when I was 16 or 17, because my brother used to play and compete when he was young, and I was his Sunday caddy. We had clubs out there, and we played, never fitted nothing. And I lived in Sweden for 12 years and all that, and I didn't really play there. As soon as I moved to Southern California, I was like, oh, it's paradise. It's time. So I picked a club. I did like everyone. I went to the range and hit balls. Kind of almost hurt my back, did everything wrong, got mad, got better, the whole thing. And then I decided, well, you know what? I'm probably going to do something good for myself. So I went to my friends at Urban Golf Performance. Probably heard about them, UGP. They are the guys behind Colin Morikawa and some great players in the LGPA side as well. And I love the philosophy, like yours. It's an equation of mental, physical, and the game. And you go in there and they look at you and you look at yourself, and I go back. I cannot swing like Rory. So stop putting me in a Rory swing. I cannot do that, right? So let's work with your level of mobility and with your swing needs and with your equipment need. I was at 19 handicapper. In less than a year, I went down to a 7 by doing the right things in series, not trying to jump fences that were too high, or dig the hole just to take a shortcut. No, you respect the process, and you need to have the right people around you as well to do that. So back to your original question, go check the material, but work with the right people. I think that's key if your goal is to get better, and better could mean different things in golf, of course.
Yeah, especially in today's age, is all of this revolves around information age and data, and anybody can get on Google and look up something. But if it doesn't apply to them, or that they could do more harm than good. So you need to go to somebody who knows what they're doing. If you're going to make the commitment, and in this game, it's a financial and time commitment, which seems to be in short supply for a lot of people right now. But if you are going to do that, even if it's one day a week, then to make sure that you're going to do it so you do improve and you do enjoy it and your growth continues. I mean, as much information as we have, it sometimes it just boils down to the simplest things that we've known since the dawn of time. Do what you need to do.
Absolutely. And I've met a lot of golfers. One common point about all golfers, they would tell you, I would love to play as long as possible. You see that? It's not about score, it's enjoying, but it's part of the enjoying. I want to enjoy the game as long as possible. Well, what's the necessary element to that? It's not about which driver you have, which wedge you have, or which ball you play. It's about the body. You should be able to still walk and hit the ball. So it starts there. You need to take care of the body. And part of it, I'm not talking aesthetics. We're talking basic mobility, and don't hurt yourself. It's so easy. It's a sport at the end of the day. A lot of people forget that it's a sport, and it's active. It could be, harsh on some parts of the body. So, yeah.
What do you see as the next big thing? Because you obviously bridge the gap between things that are on the periphery with Altair and all the industries that you're involved in, and you see the golf industry. So you have a very good perspective and vantage point from what is possible that's out there, and then what could be applied within the golfing world. Is there anything that you see on the periphery? Because that's usually where the next great thing comes from, that's going to change the game or have a big impact.
Maybe because I wear the two hats, right? I want to say the user and the guy behind, a little bit of behind the scene, right? I think when you look at the industry as a consumer products innovators, because this is what the industry is through. There are a lot of things that are going to happen, right? Cool stuff that can happen. And it's the one of the bigger driver of all that is going to be this digitalization, this transformation of the product development cycle, the way the product is thought through, the way it's going to be manufactured, the way it's going to be optimized, and data is going to be central in all that. It's understanding who we are designing for and how the product is used is going to be more and more important, and therefore injected on how the product will look and feel. And the professional tour will still be a very important element in driving this decision, right? Because at the end, but remember, Rory does not pay for his clubs, right? Or Colin or Tiger, right? So the industry needs to live. They need to get. So this is where I think the creativity will come. We start seeing it with this customization of your product, of what are you going to own. The same way you like to have a red car and a blue car, you don't want to be imposed a driver of just two colors. You want it in all different colors. Maybe you start wanting it in different shapes, as long as you can motivate that shape is better for you. So it goes back to this AI-driven data. Maybe in 30 years, we enter a booth, we do 10 swings, 10 air swings, and you click create. And 1 month later, you get a whole set delivered at your door. This one is optimized for you, sir, madam. I don't know. I say 30 years, maybe 50, maybe 100. We might be not here anymore for it, but whatever. We'll be watching it from up there. But I think there will be some cool stuff. This might all go virtual as well. It's the metaverse and this whole element, the industry has to go there as well. From a player, what I wish for is more amateur-driven type of competition, or amateur, give the amateur the opportunity to showcase the quality of the product. Because the reason I say that, imagine you and me can go and customize and create almost, or participate in creating our own equipment. I want to go out there and challenge you with my equipment versus your equipment.
Mm-hmm. Racing
my car against your car. This is my AI-driven driver, which is best for me, versus yours. Let's see how. Let's go and see how it goes on long drive distance, or on whatever course you prefer.
Mm-hmm.
This is me talking. We would go that direction. I don't know, but I think it could be fun.
Very cool. You got a few more minutes. We'll do emergency 9. This is always kind of a fun thing. Just random questions, not 9 questions. I call it emergency 9 because it's like 9 more holes after you finish 18.
Oh boy. That was the one that counted, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
I always said the first one and the last one everybody gets. So those are the 2 common, and then the 7 in between are just different. So let's jump in. So if you were going to play in the Ryder Cup, you know how they play a song now when the for your first tee shot as you're walking to the first tee. What would they play for you? What would you have them play?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm forgetting the title of the song right now, because it's a recent song that was made by a Moroccan artist after the Morocco did great at the World Cup, the soccer football World Cup. We went to the semifinal. It's it just gives me goosebumps. I think I would go for that.
Okay, pretty cool.
Yeah.
This is a new one. I haven't used this one yet. So
okay.
Do you shower in the morning or at night?
Both.
That's the answer I was looking to, that who would answer that first. And since you're the first one, it's very interesting that you answered both. Because the argument is, well, if you shower in the morning, but you don't shower at night, you're going to the bed dirty. And if you shower at night, but not in the morning, are you going to be refreshed? And so I was very curious, and that's a new one. So thanks for being the prototype as we talked about.
My pleasure. You see, my pleasure, Pete.
If as a golf fan, if you could caddy for anybody in the world, who would it be?
Tiger.
Seems to be a very popular one. Let's see. If someone gave you $1,000, you could buy anything you wanted to. What are you going to buy?
Does it need to be like something physical, or
anything you want? Anything you want for under $1,000?
Probably. I would like to. I would say buying some time with Colin. Just sitting around a coffee table or walking with him 2 holes or whatever it is. I would do that.
And is that doesn't he have an engineering degree?
He does.
Yeah, so you guys have a lot to talk about.
I'm a big fan of, there's the brain part and the execution part, and I could have said Rory as well, and I don't know why I would identify a little bit more to Colin, maybe just generation or whatever, but it's just spending time. It's the same thing. Caddying for Tiger I probably would be bothering him as long as I'm asking questions.
Picking his brain constantly.
It's going to be the last time anyway he had me on his back, so at least I take advantage.
All right. Well, to go along those lines, if you could have any golfer's game today of any of the tour pros, men, women, doesn't matter, whose game would it be?
I was going to say my game. No, probably I'm going to go back and say it's maybe Sander Schauffele. I like that composure, that slow-mo swing. I don't know. You know, yeah, probably I'm 5'7", 5'8", the same size as him, I think. And, you know, just, that's all I can get.
Yeah, well,
So
you identify with him, so that
yeah, I would be like identifying with him. I could have said Colin as well, but I'm not much of a fader of the ball. I like to draw it a little bit, so who am
okay,
I?
cool. If Hollywood came to you and said they want to make a movie about your life, what actor is going to play you?
Oh boy, none of them is good enough. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I think I would ask to play the part myself.
But like
Who's
Stallone in Rocky.
yeah? Who's better? Who's better than playing me
Yeah,
than
you
me?
lived it.
Right? I
That's
lived
right.
it. You can't get the emotion from anyone else.
That's a good one. That's a unique one and very fitting.
My pleasure.
Couple more. The last book you
Damn.
read.
I am reading right now the cultural map. So I don't know if you heard about the book or you read it. Maybe it's all about that complexity of communication between between us people coming from different part of the world and how our culture, brain, and history, whatever it is, influence the way we talk and manifest our intentions and interpret others' communication and all that stuff. Very
I
interesting. I
have heard
would
of it.
recommend it. Yeah,
I saw
I would
that.
recommend to anyone working globally to take a stab at it.
All right. Let's see. Two more. Best golf movie: Caddyshack, Tin Cup, or Happy Gilmore.
I think I haven't watched the two others. I would say Happy Gilmore just because I didn't watch the two others.
Okay.
It's the best in my list. Sorry.
Then you got to watch the other two. So put that on your list of things to do.
I will do that. I will do that.
And then the last one, in your opinion, as far as golf is concerned, who's the GOAT? Who's the greatest of all time?
Tiger.
Yeah, I think it's gotten hard to argue that one. He has taken a pretty good lead in that question.
Yeah, and I'm answering from a perspective of golf as a culture more than just the sport, right? It's the things, it's the boundaries that he's been able to push and displace and walls that he broke, and the good and bad and all of it in some sense, mm-hmm. Right? The comebacks, the emotions, and being down on the ground and win at the end of the 4 days. I mean, if that's not a message of outside of golf, that those are things. Again, I didn't live or I didn't see the whole, all of it. But if you ask me and my generation, I mean, I woke up to that and I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah, I think Trillium Rose I had on. Trillium's a top 50 coach, and we were talking last week, and I said Tiger is a very good combination, almost a balance of the popularity of Arnold Palmer and what he did for the game. With Arnold putting, mm-hmm. Came along as TV was growing and he grew, and then obviously the dominance of Jackson. Tiger is a very good blend of both Absolutely. Of them, which has done a lot of great things. All right. Hey, it's been great. Did we miss anything? We talked about a hell of a lot as far as AI is concerned. I'm sure we could go into more depth, but in general, I don't think we left anything out.
I think, we could grab a snack and come back again, but, I think we're talking about a lot of stuff. I hope it was interesting for the people watching us and listening to us. I appreciate, again, being here, Pete.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to, the curtain drawn back a little bit, that they can see what the inside of, or what goes on in the design process of equipment in general and clubs and design and how that works, and maybe something that they might have touched on an article in a magazine, but now they have the next step. And is there anywhere that people can follow you that you would recommend as far as some of the work you're doing?
LinkedIn, best way of doing it. I usually keep keep people informed of things I do and the collaboration I do with the industry and articles and things like that. More than happy to share that. Probably you can share that in the
Yeah,
comments or something like
that'll
that.
be in the.
Yeah,
I'll have a link to that directly in the summary as
wonderful.
usual. So anybody
Yeah,
that wants to connect with you, just
yeah,
click that link. It'll go right to you, and that they can reach out to you there. Awesome. I
absolutely. My
appreciate.
email address is there as well. Feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to chat about these things, help, whatever it is.
Awesome. I can't thank you enough, and I really, really enjoyed learning more about what you do and how you're helping the industry.
Thank you, Pete. Thanks for the opportunity. Ready.
Anytime.